Oh, Dr. Evil. I mean,
Hello.
hello, Bill. How the heck are you doing today?
Not too bad, Ran. Rocky's come to sit on me for once. She never usually interrupts these things, does she? So
Oh,
nice to
no.
make an appearance. Oh, and there
No,
she goes.
oh,
Like,
oh.
she just wanted her 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah. You're like, oh, you mentioned my name. You want me here? Too bad. I'm out. Well, Bill, it looks like we have the first round of the FA Cup coming up.
Mhm.
For anybody that normally tunes in, this is going to be a slight departure from the normal episodes. We're normally looking at our league games and looking at the opponents, doing some background research. And this time we're looking at the FA Cup. This is going to be the first time for this season in League Two that we are going to be seeing in the FA Cup, and we're opening it up against Mansfield Town, another team that we have faced already in this season, but a good team nonetheless. I don't know much about the intricacies of the differences between each of the 1 million cups and tournaments that run concurrently through the year. I do know that this runs at the same time during the season, and it concludes in, I believe, May, the end of the season. I don't know if it ends before the official season is over, if it's a postseason thing. And the only other thing I know is that this is the grandfather or grandmother of tournaments. This was the one that started it all in the 1800s. Outside of that, I got to lend to Bill's expertise. So Bill, what is the FA Cup?
So the FA Cup was started in the late 1800s. I think it was 1871 when I looked earlier, but I don't know.
Oof, yes, it was.
Because leagues were sort of regionalized, teams would play friendlies. There wasn't yet a lot of organized competition. There would be a lot of teams that would play, but not everyone would be entered into a league or whatever. But I think that's pre-football league, but that's something I'd have to check. But they decided to create a cup that kind of united all the leagues across England, and it included Wales at the time. I don't know how much that's something that you'd have to get a historian on. There's so much to it, Ran, that like to tell you properly. Like this is going to be like the bastardized short version that I'm
Cliff's
aware of.
notes.
So, yeah. They made the cup to sort of have like these teams that were all in all these different leagues and different levels be able to play each other. Fast forward now to today, the FA Cup is the competition where pretty much any team in England, plus a few Welsh teams, can enter. So when I say a few Welsh teams, it's the Welsh teams that are in the English league setup, not necessarily just your random Welsh team deciding to join. It's some Newport, Cardiff, Swansea, and Merthyr Tydfil who are in, I can't remember what league it is, but they're in the English setup, but lower down than the conference. And of course Chester as well. We don't want to claim them as Welsh, but their ground is in Wales, so we've got to be factual, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean that's the weird thing, right? Chester, you have this English team. I can't say the name too many because there's going to be so many boos that I don't have control over. We spoke about this before, but their actual ground that they play in, it's completely in Wales, right? The ground.
The pitch is completely in Wales. I think some of the offices and stuff are technically in England. They're on the other side of the border, so I think that's how they kind of get away with being registered as an English club. But
just invading, foot by foot every single year.
So it's hundreds of teams enter. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like you're talking possibly even close to 1,000 teams enter. It gets whittled down through qualifying rounds, and the Football League team, so that's from League Two upwards. It's actually just League Two and League One. They join in the first round proper, as it's called. So this is like once the qualifying is done, League Two and League One teams join in the first round proper, and then in the third round, Championship and the Premier League teams enter.
Wait, so just to recap that for everybody that's been watching, the new fans that were watching Wrexham over the last couple of seasons, we would have seen them in the FA Cup, but Wrexham entered in before this first round proper. So it's not truly the first round.
So it was the fourth round qualifying where Wrexham would have entered last year, and they would have had to have beaten another non-league team to get into the first round proper. And then there's still a chance that you'll draw another non-league team in the first round proper, which we did when we played Blythe Spartans, or was it Farnborough? One of them two was the first round and one was the second round. Yeah. So you still, you could still draw a non-league team, but the league teams enter at the first round. And it used to be the daddy of competitions. Everybody in England would mark the calendar for the day that the FA Cup was on. It would be the last game of the domestic season, so it would be the week after the last game of the league season, and then they'd play the FA Cup final. And it was essentially like sacrosanct. It was the game. It was 3:00 on a Saturday. Everything stopped for the FA Cup. It was the only time in like the 70s and 80s that the football would be on BBC One, which is like our main channel, from 10 till 6. You get a lot of coverage of football now, don't you? But it would just be the one day in the year that BBC One would just be at the FA Cup. So they'd be going around to all the two cities of the two teams that were playing each other, interviewing people and doing all that stuff. So it was a big spectacle. And then, over the years, it's kind of become devalued as a competition, because as soon as let's talk about another competition, the Champions League. That's the European-based competition where teams from different European countries enter. It used to be called the European Cup, and it was only the champions of each of a certain set of leagues in Europe would be entered. So you had to come first unless you'd won it the year before, and then you get automatically entered. Slowly, it got developed into a different type of competition in the Champions League. And then it was 4 teams from England, Italy, Spain, Germany, and a few of the other bigger countries got a lot of teams entered, and it all changed. But as soon as more teams were entering the Champions League and more money got into the Champions League, the FA Cup became less of a priority for the bigger teams. And then once it becomes less of a priority for the bigger teams, it kind of slowly, that attitude slowly phased its way into the rest of, I don't know, almost like the national psyche, really. If Manchester United weren't bothered about winning the FA Cup, why would anyone else care? Granted, if you're a Crystal Palace fan, or you're an Everton fan, or an Aston Villa fan, or one of these other bigger clubs in Wrexham, but clubs that are big enough that they have a chance to win it, it'd be a huge day for them. But like City's, not even B team, City's C team are probably good enough to beat most of these teams in a one-off game. So it's usually won by one of the big teams, but it's like it's not their priority. They don't care. So it's gone from being really prestigious to now it's kind of like they change the time it's played every year, and sometimes it's a couple of weeks before the end of the season, and teams kind of see it as a little bit of like, oh, do we really have to play this FA Cup game? And it's kind of lost that luster unless you are a fan of a team. Like, well, Leicester won it. Was it 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago? They were probably the last team that I was aware of that seemed to be really happy about winning the thing.
The only ones that might have had a pitch invasion.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that. It's kind of like, like how at one point it was kind of cool to like 80s stuff. Like in like 2010, 80s sort of seemed to came back in fashion. Like I feel like that's going to happen at some point with the FA Cup. Like we're in that phase just before it's fashionable again, where people are a little bit like, oh, the FA Cup, oh, that old thing.
So before it was dwindled down to being out of fashion and needing a retro call up, this used to be the premier competition. But up until about when was that? Are we in modern history? Are we?
You're talking when the Premier League went from being the first division and was still part of the Football League to becoming its own entity, and money started being put into football. That and the Champions League forming, replacing the European Cup format. Football being on TV on a more regular basis, so it wasn't just Match the Day, which is our highlights program in the UK, which is on every Saturday. That when you'd have a Saturday 12 o'clock kickoff and a Saturday 5 o'clock kickoff, and then there'd be 2 free games on a Sunday, and then there's Monday night football, and then sometimes there's Tuesday night football on TV because of Europe, and then there's football on a Wednesday because of Europe, and sometimes there'd be football on a Thursday. And like now there's even games on a Friday, when Friday was the only day of the week really that there didn't used to be football on. Whenever there was an FA Cup round, that would be the only time that it was free on terrestrial TV for people to watch. So it kind of kept that popularity, because there would always be an FA Cup game on a weekend when the FA Cup was being played, and the final was 100% always televised. So for some people who maybe couldn't afford to go to a stadium, which it was a lot cheaper back then, it was more of a working class sport. But, you're talking in the 80s and 70s, if they couldn't afford to go and watch football, the only time they would be able to watch football was when the FA Cup was on, or international competitions. But, the FA Cup was the only domestic football that you'd be able to see a whole game of live. So I think just the fact that we've got so much more exposure to stuff, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint an exact sort of time period, but I think that early to mid 90s when football became more popular was when it really started to lose it a bit. But I think it's one of those competitions now that it's more important for clubs Wrexham size than it is the top level, because it's still a huge payday for us. You get to the third round and you can draw a club like Liverpool or Man United, then you're talking a huge amount of exposure. You're talking, look, we're well off as a lower league club, but there's the prize money and the TV money that you get from getting further into the competition. I'd say we probably signed Ryan Barnett and Owen O'Connell last year off the back of our cup, the prize money from our cup runs. I'm not saying that definitely, I've not got any intel there. Right. That's the kind of money that you're talking. Like it can get you an extra player, or it can fix a roof or something. Do you know what I mean? Like for some of the smaller clubs. So this is like the exciting period of the cup for the teams like us and like Mansfield and other sides who want to progress in the hope of drawing a big club. So it's one of those. I think it's more exciting for us than it is a fan of a top Premier League club, really. But it's still got that bit of magic, but it's just not, the shine's gone a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and thanks Europe with your complicated Europeans League / Champions League, when the championship already existed. So, people out there that weren't thoroughly confused before, yes, there is a Premier League and then there's a Championship League, but there's also the European Champions League that exists. So don't worry. There's a lot of leagues that are out there. It sounds like before, at least on TV, and maybe this was before streaming, was a really big thing, that you wouldn't be able to get a lot of football on TV. And
you had to have a subscription to Sky, which is the UK satellite service.
Okay. And then even then, you're only going to be able to watch, like X amount of games that they're broadcasting. I'm picturing at some point in time until, fairly recently, when streaming video became more commonplace and higher resolution streaming video became more commonplace. Is there any correlation between the rise of media access and the tournaments? I don't know if there's any other tournaments that took a hit like the FA Cup.
I think all of the competitions have taken a hit to some degree because of the access that people have. If you're Wrexham's a perfect, maybe not so much current Wrexham because everybody wants a piece of current Wrexham, but go back 4 years ago, there would be lots of people that would say that they were a Liverpool fan, but would go and watch Wrexham once or twice a year. As soon as they could start illegally streaming Liverpool games and they could watch every single Liverpool game, that definitely affects attendances and people wanting to go, because if you're skin and you can watch a game at home for free, or you have to pay 15 quid to go and watch Wrexham, which is what it would have been at the time, you've not got much choice of you, really. You might be out of your hands, you know what I mean? So I think video streaming plays its part to a degree, but I do also think actually it's probably helped the FA Cup, because now you can get games online that previously wouldn't have been broadcast on TV. I think for some of the rounds they put a few of the games online. I could be wrong, but they're like only on the BBC sort of service. So it kind of does help give some other clubs a bit of extra exposure that they wouldn't have had previously.
Yeah, and ESPN has some broadcast deal with the FA Cup that they will play. And of course, it's whichever ones, I don't know how they decide which games are chosen to air, but they'll either play them on ESPN on the channel, or ESPN1, ESPN2, one of the channels, or on ESPN Plus, the streaming service. And that's how we got to watch Wrexham versus Coventry, and Wrexham versus Sheffield United. So that was something because of ESPN. And to my knowledge, that was very successful. They broke records for viewership on those matches. And it was, and I don't have the numbers on hand, but it was like higher numbers than what people were tuning in to watch, like the big names like Man City in the US. And so ended up being a huge game. So I guess for us, we have a lot more vested, a lot more at stake than the larger clubs. Is a team like Mansfield, team like Wrexham, are we going to be playing our first team and trying to go for the win?
Yes and no.
You heard it here first.
I think it's a tough one. I don't think either, like knowing what Parky's like as a manager and knowing what Nigel Clough's like, just because he's been around the game for so long, when he was Burton Albion's manager years ago, he got Burton Albion from the year that Wrexham came down, he got Burton Albion promoted. Well, it wasn't just him. He sort of left with a little bit of the season to go, but he got a job somewhere else. But it was his team that he'd gotten to like 3/4 of the season with. Yeah, he's had some FA Cup upsets in the past. I'm sure Burton drew with United or something along those lines when they were in the National League, and he's quite an old school manager. He doesn't strike me as somebody that wouldn't want to play a strong side. But strong doesn't mean best, does it? There could be players that are going to get rotated. Wrexham are definitely going to rotate, 100%. But when you swap James Jones for Luke Young, it's more of a sideways step than a backwards step, isn't it? There's not much of a dip in quality when you change a couple of our players. You know, Will Boyle will probably get a game, and he was in the Championship last year. So, you know, just because he's been on our bench recently doesn't mean he's a bad player all of a sudden, does it? But I don't know. I must admit, I don't know how strong Mansfield's squad is and whether they'll, you know, decide to kind of play it safe and rest a few players, or whether they've just not got the strength to be able to do that. I'm not sure, in total honesty. So no.
well, and I mean, it's hard to tell because all the variables and factors. But let's say under a typical season, a typical year, most teams, they're not going to feel inclined to put their completely first string starting lineup in. You could rotate a few players, save a few players, and then is it kind of the idea, if you progress further along, then you might take it more serious and you might put in players, where right now in the first round, it's like, okay, it'd be nice to go to the next round. Or am I dead wrong? Is it right from the beginning?
I feel like somehow we've been able to put this game in my background into context every single week, but legitimately, it's a perfect example. You know, the round before we played Coventry, we played Farnborough, and the round before that we played Blythe Spartans. In both of those games, we played weakened teams because we were playing a team that were a division or two below us. We go to Coventry, we put pretty much our full strength side out, and they don't. So I think it's just kind of like, it really does depend on who you're playing. If you can afford to rest a few players because you're playing someone in a lower division, you probably will. That's what makes this one really interesting, because we're in the same division. They're in a good run of form. We're in a good run of form. We played them recently and it was 0-0. It's really hard to call where Parky's going to go with it, to be honest. We're playing Gillingham the week after, aren't we? So that's like a game that it's a week away. But we do have a game on Tuesday the 7th of November, don't we? So
it's another cup game, right?
Yeah, it's a trophy against Port Vale. So he'll probably want to play a weakened side for that game, because that's definitely the rotation trophy. We can go through the trophies in a bit as well. I think that's probably a good idea to do that. But so. Just because that game is happening on the Tuesday, he might choose not to. It's really tough. It's really tough to call, honestly. I got a feeling there will be some rotation, but I don't know quite how deep. And then, like I say, Mansfield, it's roll of dice. Who knows?
And how? Well, let me say, Is this normal? How normal is this where you have a Saturday FA Cup game followed by a Tuesday league trophy game?
It's fairly normal. Not so once the rounds start, there's like one game a month basically with the FA Cup. One round a month, I should say, sorry, until a bit closer to the end. And I think it sort of picks up a little bit. So there's always a chance that it might cross over with a bit of something else. It's kind of weird because we're at the stage now where obviously the league games are cancelled. And then in the second round, that weekend, which I think it's like the 2nd of December, that weekend's boxed off. So there isn't a fixture then. So if we don't go through, there will be a weekend where Wrexham don't play anybody.
Any football.
Yeah, no football that Saturday. And then after that, they only cancel fixtures if one of the teams is in the next round of the cup. So whoever we're due to play on the weekend of the January the 6th, if both of us have been knocked out, I don't know who it is, but let's say it's Grimsby. If us and Grimsby have both been knocked out of the FA Cup by then, our game will go ahead. If one of the teams aren't knocked out and they're in the next round, and that game gets rescheduled for a Tuesday somewhere down the line, probably in March, probably around that sort of period. But it's not often that you get 2 cup games back to back like that. But there's so many games in the Football League Trophy that I think they just have to kind of try and shoehorn them in somehow.
Yeah, well, and we're out of one of the tournaments already. So if you don't mind, what are the tournaments that we will be participating in or already have participated in?
Okay, so when you've watched Welcome to Wrexham and they get that little pyramid diagram out, don't they, just to explain what the football system's like in England. The Premier League teams can take part in the Premier League, but they also take part in the FA Cup, the EFL Cup, which is I think it's the sponsor is the Carabao. So you'll either heard it called the EFL Cup or the Carabao Cup, and they could potentially be in a European competition. Championship, it's the same. I mean, any team in the English setup could be in Europe technically, but they're not likely to get into Europe because you'd have to win a cup. It's so complicated, mate. You come down to Wrexham's level, you take part in your league competition, the FA Cup, which is every team in England is eligible for if they qualify, the Football League Cup, which is only League 2 upwards.
Okay, that's the Carabao Cup.
So that's the Carabao Cup, yeah. The Football League Trophy, which is just teams from League 1 and League 2.
And that's Papa John's?
Yeah, apparently it's not got a sponsor anymore. It was Papa John's last year, but apparently it's not got a sponsor. I didn't realize that until like a couple of days ago. So yeah, but would have been called the Papa John's previously, but it's just the Football League Trophy now. So it's 4 competitions that Wrexham have to enter. The league's always a priority because obviously you want to get promoted or try and, if you're in the Premier League, just try and win the league or stay in the league or whatever. But these cup competitions, especially for teams that are going through a bad run of form, can actually be a bit of a blessing because you get to play a game against potentially better opposition or worse opposition. There's a bit of a free hit. You know, if you're, let's say, Sutton, who are struggling for a bit. I mean, they won at the weekend, didn't they, to be fair, but they're struggling for a bit of form. I don't know who they're playing against, but it might be nice to have like a no pressure. Oh, well, if we lose, we get knocked out. Who cares? Like, we're trying to survive. Yeah. If we win, great. That's a confidence boost. You know, that's like a bit of a push up. And I think Wrexham have used that well in the past. We've actually got a history of giant killing. It has been talked about on the documentary, and especially in one of the episodes recently, but we are giant killers. We've as a team have always been the David and the David Goliath story. You know, and I remember growing up, like we seem to be playing a Premier League team in the cup every other week at one point. I remember us drawing 1-1 in the 90s against West Ham, and it was like the pitch was frozen. There was like snow all over the place. It was the first time they played with an orange ball that I'd seen live, playing with an orange ball.
So that you could see it?
Yeah. So they wouldn't. So now, obviously, they have to. You would have seen on that episode recently where they cleared the pitch, but back then they just cleared the lines. So the whole pitch would be covered in snow, but they would just dig the lines out so that you could see where the penalty spot was.
That's all you needed.
Yeah, and an orange ball instead of a normal ball.
Wow.
the players would just be freezing to death. It would be the only time that you'd see, players with gloves back then and maybe a long sleeve top, even though they'd usually wear short sleeve. And that was about all they sort of did extra. But obviously they've modern day sports science and all that. All these modern footballers are wimps, aren't they? Not wanting to get their legs shredded apart by ice on the floor.
Yeah. The gall of them. What kind of weaklings are out there that don't want cheese graters to attack the sides of their legs and thighs?
Yeah, right. I know.
Be a real man.
Yeah. Yeah. So like in my lifetime, Wrexham have won some really big FA Cup games. We played some, in some League Cup games and stuff like that. I think Wrexham and the FA Cup it's like a happy union. Like, we've got good memories with this cup. And whenever the FA Cup's on the BBC and in the intro to whatever program it is, you always see that Mickey Thomas free kick, in like the highlight reel of all the different highlights from different FA Cup games. It's Mickey Thomas's free kick. It's like completely synonymous with the competition.
And for anybody that doesn't know, what was that Mickey Thomas free kick?
So Wrexham were bottom of League Two, and Arsenal had won the Premier League. It was called the First Division then, but they won the Premier League the year before, and we beat them 2-1 after they'd scored first, and Wrexham scored 2 goals in like the last 5 or so minutes. That was in '92, so I was born, but no recollection whatsoever of it happening. And then a couple of years after that, we beat West Ham in the cup, but we drew. So what they have to do another crazy rule that would only happen in Britain, but hear me out. In the FA Cup, if you draw a game, you have to replay it. You don't go to extra time. You replay the game at the opposition's home ground. So if you're the home team, the replay would be away, and vice versa. I think it was 97, although someone's going to correct me on that. We drew 1-1 with West Ham at home and then beat them in the replay at Upton Park. We've beaten Birmingham City, who were in the Championship, and when we were in League Two, we've beaten Middlesbrough in the Premier League. That was all of them were in the 90s. I remember when was it? 2012, we beat Brentford. They were in League One and we were in the National League, but they, look what Brentford had done now. They're in the Premier League. They were on their way to becoming really good. We drew with Brighton, who were in the Championship, but we came up the year after that. So, and then obviously the Coventry game and the way we played against Sheffield United, and there's loads more games like from the 70s and 80s. We played Newcastle, we played Arsenal back then, Spurs. So yeah, we've got there's some good books out there whose names I can't remember, so do some Googling, but I think it's something like Wrexham Giant Killers or something it's called, and it's got like first-hand accounts of all these different games, and it's a really good book, and it's definitely worth digging out if you can find it online. I couldn't do some of those games in the 80s and 70s justice, really, but
why weren't you watching those games, Bill? What's wrong with you?
Time travel hadn't been invented yet.
Yeah. Well, it does now, and so you have no excuse. So I don't understand this lazy man over there that refuses to just put on his pants one leg at a time, get in his time machine like the rest of us, and go watch these matches. But go ahead.
No, go on.
Okay. So this is something that, as a Wrexham fan, this is actually an exciting competition where it might not be so much prestige for the higher up clubs, but for us, this is something where we get to, lick our chops and get mixing in with some bigger teams and do some more giant slaying and David versus Goliath. This is something where somebody like Paul Mullen is like, he lives for this kind of stuff to get out there. Is there anybody else on our team? I mean, of course, Parkey has made some deep runs before with Bradford when he in the FA Cup. And so we have a winning pedigree, but is there any other players on our team that you think, like Mullen, who just lives for this type of stuff, facing those giants and showing them what he can do?
I want to just really, really quickly check what's Stephen Fletcher's history with the FA Cup like. I'm not sure whether he's had much of a look at his honours list. Oh no, my bad. So Stephen Fletcher was in the Football League Cup. He was a runner-up for the Football League Cup. I knew he'd got to a cup final with Sunderland, but it wasn't the FA Cup. But he's obviously got that pedigree of being able to get to a cup final. He actually got to the French Cup final as well, which is like the French equivalent of the FA Cup. So speaking of like the FA Cup is not really replicated in many countries. There aren't many countries that have that many teams allowed to sort of enter one competition. The Coupe de France is one of the few that actually is very similar. They have like some of the island nations in Africa and South America that are still French colonies. They come and join the competition sometimes. But yeah, so Stephen Fletcher's won the Scottish League Cup with Hibernian and was a runner-up in the Football League Cup with Sunderland and a runner-up with the Coupe de France with Marseille. So he's got a bit of cup pedigree. It's not the FA Cup, but he still has that sort of, that knockout winning game mentality.
He seems like the type that would be too. Like, he's a gamer. I know that, there's different people that like, he's the super sub. You bring him in, he's a little bit older legs and he comes in for that 20, 30 minutes and he can play hard and give you those young legs for a shorter amount of time. But even when he starts, he still has those moments of magic where like he wants to make the highlight reels. He's not satisfied with just going up and down.
Nah, he's brilliant, mate. I love him. He's actually as well. Like I remember growing up watching the FA Cup as a neutral, and let's say I don't know, just for argument's sake, Crewe got into the third round and they played United, and it would be on TV. I don't think that was a game that happened. I'm just humour me for a second. Yeah. And there would be someone playing for Crewe that you'd be like, bloody hell, he still plays. Like I didn't know he played for Crewe. Stephen Fletcher, if we get on TV, will be a lot of people's like, bloody hell, Stephen Fletcher's still playing and he's at Wrexham.
Nice.
Yeah.
So he's that well known. And
he's definitely well known. He had like one or two really good seasons for Sunderland that like he didn't, in terms of the elite level, he's obviously had a very good career. He's played for Premier League teams. He's played for French league teams. I never, ever criticize anyone who's played professional football, but in terms of the elite, he's maybe not quite at the elite level, but at one point he was still a fairly well, I wouldn't quite say household name, but everybody who likes football would have known who he was. Definitely. Yeah.
So it is even a bigger, I'm going to use the only other French word I know, a bigger coup that we got Fletcher onto our team. I mean, it would be some magic to see a good draw or a good tie and have another big team name come up. We had middle of the table Coventry that we didn't look like we were out of the league. We looked like we were playing in the same league with them. And then we had top of the championship league, Sheffield United, who got promoted. They had to play us twice to get out of there.
Coventry got to the playoff final as well. They didn't end up going up. Luton beat them, but they were no pushovers. Coventry were a good side. I think, to be fair, they were mid-table when we played them, but they went on a good run not long after we played them. So
after they took that loss, they were like, no.
Yeah, two really good sides, and I think the style of football we play, it kind of suits us to play better teams. I mean, look, you saw it the weekend when we played Notts County. We actually kind of thrive when we're playing teams that want to come and attack us. I think when teams sit off, it makes it difficult for us to break them down. So playing a big team, and look, I don't want to be too much of a bragger because I'm part of the crowd. But when you get 8,000 Reds showing up to Coventry and just singing the whole, it wasn't quite 8,000, it was like 5 or 65, whatever.
Yeah, or was it 45? It was 1 million.
That's what it was. Yeah. When a million Wrexham fans descend upon the Rico Arena, teams don't have a chance. The atmosphere is just it can proper rattle some teams, and the Coventry fans didn't take it seriously because they were looking for promotion. So I mean, you can see all the empty seats. It's become, those early rounds have become weird. It's kind of like you only start caring about it when you get to the quarterfinal. If you some of the bigger clubs, do you know what I mean? When there's a chance to get to Wembley, then they start taking it a bit more seriously. But I'm really intrigued about this weekend. It would be nice to beat Mansfield, but we're kind of in a lucky position where if we get knocked out, it really isn't the end of the world because we've got other things to be focusing on. So it's kind of a no pressure situation. And then if we win, you go into the second round. You still got a chance to play someone like Chester or Shrewsbury if they get through their games. But the real money's in that third round draw, and
So at this moment, this first round proper, this is just League One, League Two teams. There's nobody above,
and any National League downwards teams that are still in the competition.
Okay. But the highest competition that will be faced right now would be League One. Okay.
Yeah, and the same for the second round as well.
Okay. So until round 3, then you see Championship and Premier at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. And then it could be right now that some of these ties, the storyline has been flipped, and Wrexham might be looking like a giant to some of these other non-league teams that if they make it through, we could be a team that they're like, ooh, we drew Wrexham in the FA Cup.
I think we're a team no one wants to draw because some people won't like the whole circus around us, and there is a little bit of a media circus. The BBC will pretty much pick any Wrexham game they can get their hands on as long as the opposition is of enough interest, because they want an excuse to try and get Ryan Reynolds on the channel, don't they? Which
housewives around the world want that.
So, exactly. Yeah. And house husbands, I think, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, house everyone's. Yes.
But I think it's like kind of like one of those weird scenarios where teams in our league won't want to play us, and we won't necessarily want to play them, because what are we going to get out of beating another League Two team? It's not exciting for either side. Some National League teams are going to look at us and think, you're big, but we wanted to go to Anfield, or we wanted to go to Old Trafford. We don't want to get knocked out by Wrexham in the second round because we want to play bigger fish than them. And and fair enough, but at the same time, maybe like when we played Blythe and Farnborough last year, that was a chance for their fans to come to a ground that would have been bigger than they're used to. And I'm sure there's a lot of teams that would be quite happy to play us just purely because they might get on TV, and there's that extra bit of money for having an appearance fee for being on TV. So lower teams lower than the National League would be quite happy to play us. Everyone else would just not fancy playing us at all, I don't think, at the moment.
Well, and that's exciting, because I don't know exactly where we're at in the Wrexham timeline. As we look to the history of Wrexham and the journey, it's not stopping at League Two or League One. Hopefully the promotion keeps going. And so year after year, the storyline is going to slightly change at who are those giants that the Dragon Slayers are going up against. Who are they? And that's going to change. That field's going to get smaller and smaller. And then obviously will become those giants to other teams. But yeah, like you said, at the moment right now, it's the circus that's around us, where if you're a lower team, you're like, well, do I even, we want to just get past that League Two, League One team to get to a bigger team. Do I really want to go up against a circus, or would I even want to face this team who's had recent success within cup runs and face them now? Like,
there's another side to that as well. So there's almost like an unspoken rule that if a lower team draw a big team at home, they're like more likely to be on TV. I don't know what it is about BBC, where they just like go into grounds that look like they're in someone's garden. Like Spurs played Marine a couple of years ago. Marine are a team just on the outskirts of Liverpool. They're like 2 or 3 leagues below the National League. I think we might have played them actually at some point. Maybe it was the 4th round qualifying. I'm not sure. I can't remember, but they love that because the Marines ground is surrounded by houses, and everyone was just it was during COVID, so no one was actually allowed in the ground, but everyone was just standing in their garden watching like, because Gareth Bale was on loan at Spurs at the time, so they had like Gareth Bale and Heung-min Son and all these other players like knocking about in someone's garden basically. But what happens basically is that with the competition, that if whoever's playing against each other, the gate gets split 45%, and then the league take the FA take 10%. So if you're on top of the fact that you might be on TV if you play one of the big teams, you're gonna get, like if you're playing United and United sell, even if they just sell 30,000, 40,000 tickets, you're getting 45% of that. It's a lot of money in it, for a team. Maybe it'd be good money for Wrexham, but if you're a Dorking Wanderers or a Kidderminster or someone like that, like that's a good healthy chunk of change. Like again, like we were saying, probably helped us sign those couple of players last year. For a team like that, like that's security that could help keep the lecky on for the electric. I mean, for a while. So yeah, it's a competition that I think a lot of clubs definitely value, and 45% of a racecourse sellout when the tickets are probably going to be a tenner a ticket to get everyone in, or 45% of Everton's ground is, that's why they overlook us as much as anything. Because I'm sure most teams would like to beat us, but just that extra money from playing at these grounds is completely invaluable.
Yeah, and we don't have the new COP opened up, so we do have that.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, that doesn't help.
Well, I mean, it's obviously exciting, but we can't count our chickens before they hatch. No. We're not to the point yet within the FA Cup with the rounds where we have the large teams that are coming in. Still exciting to play Mansfield again, to see what's going to happen. What Parky, I trying to think of like a very well-known chess player, and all I could think of is like Bobby Fischer, the young American kid that played. Yeah. And I can't remember the Russian that he played, but yeah. So anyways, insert
Deep Blue. Was it the robot?
Blue. Yeah.
Was it Deep Blue or no?
No.
I'm thinking of Deep Mind, and I am thinking of the AlphaGo and the Deep Mind. Sorry.
Yeah, AlphaGo. Lee Sedal beat him on the first round of Go, which is like that Chinese chess game with infinitely more moves. And but then it was.
My sister-in-law actually works for DeepMind, who made AlphaGo, but that's a conversation for off camera. But she
I know, as we get deep into the nerd life of chess and Go, yes. So so we aren't going to have those big giants to face quite yet, but Parky has been pulling some crazy tactics, like we saw against Notts, and even when it's going up into cup games, he still is a master of knowing how to play the team and play the weaknesses and exploit. He runs his game against other people. And we were talking before about, the Parky formation, and it's like, yes, he loves his formation, but he also has specific players to specific matchups that he likes, where we've heard the grumbling this whole season when you see your favorite player or somebody who you think is playing well not get the start, and he puts somebody else in, and you're like, what is Parky thinking? But we're sitting here with only 2 losses throughout the season. Well, Parky's thinking. He's definitely thinking. And I won't even begin to question. I don't know enough about football. Even when I played, I didn't pay attention enough about the rules of football to even question what Parky is thinking at any point in time. I just assume he is releasing the 10 commandments of football every week, and we just need to follow those rules and we'll be okay. Because he's hot. He's got the hot hand.
He's so hot right now.
He's so money. He's so money.
Be honest with me, mate. How did you feel when that starting lineup came out on Saturday? Because I found the reaction really interesting.
Well, okay, so obviously you posted about it, and it was like, this is either amazing or suicidal. I forgot the exact words. I'm paraphrasing, but it was one of those. And it's like, well, I'm excited or depressed. I don't know which one, or excited or anxious. But yeah, when you saw the lineup, at least for me, I went, wow, damn it, there's Snots County Zone that is going to have all this shit to say about this. And, it's going to be like, oh, look what your wizard put together. He made all the wrong decisions, and see how this person got beat and exploited. And then the game in the first half happened, and you're like, okay, Parky, you obviously know what you're doing. And I would love to see, obviously, like within the documentary, we haven't seen that tactician style within Parky. I guess those secrets are too closely held that you can't give up that type of stuff even within the documentary. But that would be the stuff that I would love to be the fly on the wall, to hear the conversation that he's talking to these players like Mendy that's playing out of position, and he's saying, hey, like, here's what you're going to do. Even though you're out of position, here's how I'm going to have you attack. Here's how I'm going to have you, shut down Joey Jones, which Mendy did an outstanding job on Joey Jones, even though I think Knott's called him player of the match. It's like, okay, if he was player of the match and he got shut down, we'll take that every single day.
Said a lot, didn't it, about our performance? I mean, I just think for me, like in the cold light of day, that formation was a bit like, that's strange. That's strange, but everyone was losing their heads, and I just thought, like you say, he's so considered that it's like I just felt like he's seen something here. There's a reason that he's playing two midfielders as centre backs. I'm not intelligent enough to understand why, but I just know that something's going on.
Yeah.
Like a fly getting hit on a fly trap. Like they know something's going on. They don't quite know exactly what it is, but it's like, I don't mind that. That's all right.
Well, and to that point, we have some real world experience that as fans, we could have just paid attention throughout last season, the season before, this season. We could have just watched history and it would have told us to trust Parky, and not unequivocally trust Parky. But think about every single match that happens, and it's, Parky starts slow. We're not off to the races in the first half, but in the second half, Parky makes those adjustments because he sees the game and he makes the adjustments. He talks to the players and we have a better second half. We seem to dismantle people in the second half. That history has been in front of us for more than one season right now, where we know that the tactician that Parky is will dismantle based upon what he sees. But for some reason, we forget that when he puts in a lineup to start the beginning of the game, we're like, what is he thinking? What could he possibly? But then we put all the trust. If we're down 2-0, 3-0 at the half, pretty much those same people, not everybody, but pretty much those same people are going, well, Parky's going to make some adjustments. Let's see what Parky does in the second half to address these things. And those same people are echoing trust and faith in Parky's tactician skills and to make those adjustments. But we don't give the same trust at the beginning of the match when he's setting a lineup to start. And I think that it's like fool's errand. I think we learned now just to trust whatever he's doing.
I think this just means that you and your other international friends have made it, Ran. You're officially full-blown Wrexham fans, where all logic and common sense completely thrown out the window, and you just don't listen to your head. You just listen to your heart completely. That's what being a football fan is just looking at the evidence and just completely disagreeing with it.
You have made it. You are an idiot.
You made it, mate.
That's how you know. I like that to progress to a greater level means that you're using less logic and reason. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. But the heart leads. I mean, I can't argue with you because the emotions take over. And then the wins start to mean more. The losses start to mean more. And as the season goes on, those things compound. And so when you see something like, okay, we're facing Knott's, who's second in the league right now and who's been doing really good in League Two and are a team for us to beat as well as a team for other people to beat. And then we see something that's like, don't get too cute, like play what works and don't get too cute. And I don't know if it's a thing. Like, I don't know if I'll eat these words later or Parky will look like a fool at some point in time. But how many games now have we had with Parky? Has Parky played like 100 games already? Has he, and he still has looked like a brilliant tactician. I don't
look. Almost all of his failures have been during the first half of the season, because, like you say, he's clearly one of those who makes adjustments as he goes along. And to add to that, the vast majority of any game we can say he didn't pull it off there. We're in his first season when it wasn't really his team, and he was dealing with having players that weren't his players. Granted, more money was put in as well, so you can't completely dismiss that. But he's just in my mind, he's just a genius. He's just an absolute genius, and I know his style of football is frustrating, which is why I think he doesn't get the credit he deserves. But he just makes teams that have an absolute monster mentality. Like, they are fucking ruthless, mate. This is the most ruthless Wrexham side I've ever seen in my entire life. One of the most ruthless football teams I've ever seen in my life. It's just Elliot Lee just scoring bangers in the 88th minute on regular basis. It's not one off. Like, this is like regular ruthless. Yeah. Absolutely. He knows how to make a team. He's special, mate. Absolutely special.
Yeah, and he knows how to keep them hungry. How to keep people just still wanting more. As far as like the players, he makes them fight for their positions, fight for their roles, fight for that start, fight for their time. I don't know how nerve-wracking it would be to play for Parky, at some point in time, never thinking, okay, my start is secure. At any point in time, somebody else could replace me, or somebody else could come in. Is there, Okonkwo in goal right now, that position's not under threat. Mullen up top, that position's not under threat. Are there any other positions that are secure?
No, I mean, look, even Elliot Lee didn't start against Sutton, did he? And granted, that was probably more a fatigue thing, but still, he still didn't start, did he? At the end of the day, like, we don't need to play him. We still win. I mean, it was him that scored the goal, but we still win the games. You know what I mean? It's crazy, mate. It's such a fun time to be a Wrexham fan. And that's why I do think he will rotate a little bit this weekend, just because he's got to keep some of those players who aren't starting every week happy, isn't he? So it's just one of those things, I think.
So I'll throw that out to you. You good transition. So what kind of lineup, if we had to, there's got to be some brilliant, clever, punderful way to guess Phil's lineup for the week of his rotation, what he's going to do. You already said Luke Young. You think he might start?
So I think I'll go from top to bottom, I suppose. I think Howard starts instead of Okonkwo, just because, there's a bit of like a tradition of the second choice getting most of the cup games. I don't think it's nailed on, but I think he will start Howard. Left and right back depends on fitness, really, because, Mendy pulled up during that game, didn't he? And McLean's getting on a bit, so maybe it's a good time to rest him. So I suppose it depends who's the fittest out of them two, or do you start, because the squad regulations don't apply to the FA Cup. So could Callum McFadden come in? Could Bryce Hosanna come in? So I'm not too sure about the full backs. Centre backs, I think Will Boyle will get a bit of time. I think Cleworth might get a bit of time as well. And then again, fitness depending on that third spot. Young and Davis will probably start for me. But again, don't know who that third centre midfielder is going to be out of them. Maybe Cannon, just because he's had a bit of a break with the suspension. And Mullen probably plays just because he's going to be suspended for the Gillingham game, isn't he? So I think Parky tends to, when he knows players are going to have a break, he tends to play him. So it probably means McLean will play as well. And then it's one of Dalby, Fletcher, Palmer, who the hell do you choose out of them three? But it's one of them three that are going to play alongside Mullen, I'd imagine. That's what I think anyway. But then again, I didn't expect to see two centre midfielders as centre backs on Saturday and Andy Cannon starting. So what do I know? Yeah.
And now this is obviously a different team. Mansfield is a much more defensive team, and which, judging by the goals against or conceded for Notts and us, that we are not quite the same defensive team, but we held Mansfield. It was 1-1, right? I'm sorry. No, it was 0-0.
Yeah, it was 0-0.
Yeah, it was 0-0. And so they're not easy to score on.
No.
So does Parky try to, get in and get an early goal and just, hold on to that goal for the rest of the game? Or is it a start X amount of people? You've got Dalby starting again. We've got that rotation. And then later on, after that 70 minutes or so, bring on a couple of our big swingers and see if we can put something together. I mean, it would be good to see Luke Young out there, see him get some minutes, get some time. Davis, of course, would be good. But we're actually hurting a bit on the right wing. So it's a good opportunity also for him to try some things out too. Okay, if Barnett is out for 8 weeks, so I suppose
it's a tough one, isn't it? I don't know how close Ford is to fitness. But if he's ready to play some minutes, you'd get him in there because you want him in the side as soon as possible. If Barnett's going to be out for 2 months or whatever it is they think he's going to be out for now. I think I saw 8 weeks, but I don't know whether you know, but I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah, they said like him and Tunnicliffe said something like 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah. So you try and get Ford back into fitness as quickly as possible, but then you also don't want him getting injured. So maybe you wait for the trophy game, which is it's not going to be as hotly contested. I'd say it'd be a bit more like a friendly, really. Like there's no cut restrictions. Maybe Hosanna's ready to go. Who knows? But it's a tough one to pick that position, really.
Yeah. Well, and let's say, okay, so Barnett's out for 6 to 8 weeks, and Ford has some lingering issues, some injuries. Does Parkey mess around with playing for 6 to 8 weeks, Mendy on the right side, and let's get him more time in that role so he feels more at home? Because
that's definitely a possibility, mate. Yeah.
He's been doing good, but then there are those times where he's out of position, where you could tell that's not his natural side, and it's a learning curve. And Parkey is one that he likes to get minutes for the people that are in the position. But definitely, if Ford can play, that would be ideal. It really, really is horrible. It sucks because Barney was doing so good. He was doing so good. His crosses, he was beating the man on man and just taking that quick step, that step over, the little cut to the side.
Yeah.
And he was showing his speed. Oh my God. You're like, that's what we need. We've got crosses coming from the left, crosses coming from the right. And we've got, our hungry scorers. We've got Fletcher and Lee and Mullen and Palmer, and to an extent, Dalby, just waiting for those balls to come inside to complete them. And it really looked like, hey, look at these pieces are coming together. This is what we needed to attack on both sides. And then the injury bug, the suspension bug. And when is it not till the new year that we go from 5 yellows to 10?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not 100% certain, but I think it's the new year. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it can't happen soon enough that we're sitting here with, I think Palmer has 4. There's a good number of us that still have 4.
As long as it's staggered, mate, I think our squad's deep enough that we could probably just about handle it, but who knows?
Yeah. And it's so crazy because we keep them guessing and not always on purpose, or maybe the injuries are not on purpose, but the depth has so many different players coming in that it really is hard to line up for another team of how are you going to play us defensively when our positions and players can change on the drop of the dime. Like you can't set one type of defense you could get Mullen and Palmer, but then you could have Mullen and Fletcher, or you could have Fletcher and Palmer, and then you could have Lee. You could have Lee, Palmer, and Fletcher to deal with, or Lee, Palmer, and Mullen. It's just ridiculous the amount of managing and coaching that other teams are needing to do this season to compete with us. And this is by no means saying we're going to wipe the league and we're going to walk through everybody. But man, for us struggling and not hitting our stride, we're keeping an amazing pace.
Yeah, we are, mate. Yeah.
If this is not doing good, if we haven't hit our form yet, I feel bad for the league when we hit our form. Because if we can hit our form, because our form doesn't draw with Mansfield. Our form takes apart the best defense in the league.
We'll see. I'm not getting too carried away just yet. Let's get there.
I don't know what our form. I don't know. We could go the whole rest of the season and we could not see the true potential. That could happen. There could be injury, suspensions. There could be players that just aren't playing and don't show up and they look like ghosts of themselves out there. Anything can happen. Of course, anything can happen. But if all of our players that are our good players click and we are in full stride, we might be one of the scariest teams in the league to face. They're facing a wounded Wrexham and we have 2 losses. That's scary.
It's crazy.
On the opposite side, before I get too big for my britches, it's like, but then, that was a tough game with Sutton.
And Mansfield are a good side as well, mate, aren't they? So let's see. All I want at this stage is I either want to lose or win. I don't really want to replay because they're just a pain in the backside, and we could just do with knowing where we stand, really, rather than having to play another game against them. So let's hope somebody wins at the weekend, preferably Wrexham.
So any boldness of prediction for this match? Because we're shooting so blind. We have no idea what the lineups are going to be, how it's going to go.
Yeah. I'm going to go with 1-1 because it just seems like we always seem to get a replay in the cup these days. So I feel like they're going to be a tough side to play away from home. So yeah, 1-1 for me.
All right. I'll put a little explanation on mine. I'm going to go 0-3 because I believe we're playing at Mansfield. So it'll be 0-3 Wrexham. And my logic behind that is that Mansfield will be resting players. They'll be rotating. And our depth just has that much more attacking power that if another team decides to rest any of their players and give them some time off of their feet, that's just opportunity for us. And we have a bunch of players who are fighting for positions on the team that want to be the player that starts. And so we've got a lot of hunger out there. That's my roll of the dice. I'm going to go 0-3. I'm with you.
I hope your American optimism rubs off on the players, mate.
It's stupidity. It's not optimism at this point. It's 0-10 is what it's going to be. But I mean, hope for the best because we have no clue what's going to happen. And like you said, as long as it's not a replay, it'll be good to get minutes on people's legs, a good break from all of the anxiety around who's going to be getting their fifth yellow and is Lee going to miss. So there'll be some more free reins where more players like Lee can do the tackles that he likes to do, and he doesn't have to hold up and be so cautious. And, he's been playing with that governor for like 3 weeks now and playing a little bit more cautious. And maybe he needs some of that experience of just going out there, getting to play his game so that as he moves forward, he doesn't have to hold back as much. I would love to see full speed Lee, full speed Mullen, full speed Fletcher in the mix and just see what happens with them. If
what kind of magic they can strike up.
Yeah. Just what kind of ridiculous highlight reel. And I'm not going to go so bold as to say who's going to score those 3 goals. But one of those magic men got to grab one of them. Well, Bill, thanks for schooling us on some FA Cup. I'm going to try to find some type of visual thing that shows the different tournaments.
Yeah, like, the EFL. I feel like I rambled a lot in that because it's an intricate web, British football, especially English system. So go and do your own research. Go and have a proper look because I'm sure I haven't done it any justice. But
it's not your fault. The leagues have made their own problems with naming them like the worst names, double naming things. There's championship, but then there's champions. It's this is the League Cup. This is the League Trophy. This is the EFL Cup. They've done themselves no favors if they didn't want to confuse. And I can only imagine each tournament that has come about has tried to make it sound similar enough so that it sounds familiar, so that people are like, oh yeah, this is important. We should watch it. If it's on TV somewhere, we should probably watch this because this is probably has some significance and importance. But yeah, well, thank you again, Bill. Have a great week. We will see what happens on Saturday, and hopefully this time next week we are talking about how brilliant Parky is again.
Yeah, hopefully, mate.
All right, Bill, take it easy.
Yeah, you too, mate. Cheers.
Cheers. Up the town.
Up the town.